Hello, everyone, and welcome to this afternoon's session. For those of you on the West Coast, good morning. Today, we are here with an incredible panel of experts to discuss law firm reopening best practices, something that as we move through the various stages of this pandemic has become top of mind recently for many law firm owners, administrators, and managing partners. To kick things off today, we'll be speaking with Ken Kennedy, co-founder of the Circle Management Group. He's an incredible wealth of knowledge when it comes to security best practices, as well as law firm technology and various other areas of business and operational management. I encourage you to submit your questions to the panelists during the course of today's presentation. I will be in the background monitoring those, and we'll make sure that they get over to the team. And without further ado, Ken, thank you so much for leading today's discussion, and off we go.
Thank you, Chelsea. Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce the other members of our panel. We have Peter Fiedler. Peter's president of WCA Technologies, which is an IT consulting firm in New York City. He works with small, mid-sized, nonprofit, and law firm clients. Peter's expertise ranges from cloud to email systems to database applications, network security, infrastructure, and he's regularly invited to speak on emerging technology, cybersecurity, and business productivity. Barry Handwerger is president of MC Office Furniture. That's a full-service furniture dealership. They focus on relationships with business leaders, real estate professionals, architects, and designers. Barry's been doing this for over 25 years in the industry, and they always deliver a complete, creative, and cost-effective solution to their business challenges. They want a perfect office experience for their clients from the initial consultation through the drawings and to the final installation on the furniture. And then our third panelist is Rick Mallon. He's principal and VP of sales at Telecom Infrastructure Corp. And Rick works with our company, which is a technology design and construction company. They specialize in AV, data cabling, security, wireless, and power over Ethernet lighting systems. And over the 15-year career Rick's had it, he's consulted on and built millions of square feet out for clients on his side of it. So we have a very qualified panel today, and we're looking forward to it. So let's open it up. Over the last 5 to 7 years, there's been a lot of talk about open plan systems and benching desks and the different things like that have changed in office environments. So Barry, could you introduce that to us? For those of us who aren't sure, tell us what that is and kind of talk about what's going on with that.
Great, thanks, Ken. So I would say in the last, I'll reiterate the last 5 to 7 years, specifically in the New York market, but really nationally, is that majority of our clients, almost 80% of our clients, have designed their spaces to do open spaces. And what that really means is doing these benching desks. In turn, their ideas were, how do we maximize the space with as many people as possible, get them in a collaborative environment, and really fulfill the needs for what our present day space is, and obviously for potential growth, but obviously maximizing our real estate expenses. So what's happened with that, because of COVID, is now we're realizing that people are very close to each other, and how do we sort of protect them? So getting people back to the office, which is obviously the obviously talk of this conversation, is how do we get people back to the office in a format that basically makes the employees feel comfortable, and obviously make sure that the employers feel comfortable that they're making the best efforts to keep their employees safe. So we've been doing a tremendous amount of plexiglass within environments. These open benching desks are sometimes fixed height or adjustable. So there'll be obviously different products that will be used for different pieces. But for the most part, they're obviously all the same as far as getting them dividers so people can potentially sit next to each other in a comfortable environment, then they have the plexiglass around them. Now, with that is that the whole model has been always 6 feet apart. So how are people 6 feet apart if they're sitting at a desk that's maybe 5 feet to the next desk is 5 feet? So when we in turn put in this plexiglass at a certain height, it's always typically above their heads. So it allows them to feel they're contained in an environment and they can really go to their desk and do their thing and be comfortable and not have to wear a mask within their environment because they have these sneeze guards on all sides of them. Now, another part of what we've been doing with these bench desks or workstations, because sometimes the workstations aren't tall enough as well, is doing a lot of reconfigurations. And what that means is really trying to separate the units to get them further away from each other. The problem is that everybody's been going, sort of how I started the conversation, everybody's been working with sort of a packed house and really maximizing their spaces. So there's not a lot of flexibility sometimes for certain spaces. But because people are realizing that not everybody needs to get back, and they want to keep people a little bit more separated. Some of the challenge that will happen as we sort of do some reconfigurations will be some data cabling and some electrical, which Rick could sort of jump in on.
Okay, Rick, I'm sure that's a big part of the process. Could you talk to us about it a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Barry mentioned, a lot of our clients are kind of taking the route of instead of renovating their spaces and really reconfiguring, they are going to more that retrofit model. So we are seeing a lot of plexiglass installations. But for our clients that are demoing out their furniture and then reconfiguring to either higher bank or more spaced out furniture systems, a lot of times these projects can become large construction projects, and there's a lot of important components to consider when you are going to a full furniture reconfiguration. Oftentimes there's 3 trades involved. You'll have the electrician, the low voltage integrator, as well as the furniture dealer, all involved in coordinating and making sure that everything goes well. And we've recently written an article about the things you should consider when you're planning a furniture reconfiguration. So I'll list a few of them just so you have an idea of things to consider if you are going that route. So core drilling and wall locations, are they reusable? So cables typically come down a wall feed location and they enter the furniture, or they come down a power pole location and enter the furniture. If you're changing the layout of the space and the layout and configuration of that furniture, will the power poles and furniture feed locations be reusable? So oftentimes they're not. So you need to take a look at this up front and make sure that you can reuse those locations. If not, will new cabling be required in order to reach the higher bank cubicles? With higher bank cubicles comes higher, usually bench belt line design, so the cables come in higher, so you need to determine if the cables can be reused or if they need to be repulled. Another important component is who's below you, because the cables often come from a core drill that is fed from the floor below. So is the tenant below a friendly tenant? Do they have drop ceilings, or do they have metal or glass ceilings that you'll have to kind of retrofit, which again becomes a big construction project. So you need to consider who's down there. Are they going to be friendly with you, and will they let you touch their ceilings? Windows for downtime. So oftentimes our clients have a window for downtime of only 48 hours. It could be a Friday night through a Sunday because the spaces are occupied. COVID has actually been a blessing in regard to this because we're able to get in during the day and get work done. But that's not always the case. So depending on the client requirements, we need to figure out what time we're allowed to come in there and get our work done. And then the last thing I would say is opportunities for upgrade. So are there other things that can be done on site from a construction perspective while you have technicians on site doing other work? So we always consider upgrades to furniture as a big opportunity to do that, because you'll have a lot of people in the space for other reasons.
Sounds like you have a lot of moving parts that have to go together to make this work. And I'm also thinking about, having spent 10 years remodeling a house that was built in the 1930s. I could just imagine all of those things happening and trying to keep your business going at the same time. So let's get into some of the protocol and what goes on for actually opening the office and what's required there. So not only in the office itself as we bring our employees back to work and as you bring them back to the law firm, but for those of you who have to send employees on site for whatever reason they have to go there, I'm sure there's some protocol involved in that has to be done. And I'm curious about the policies and the ways you've dealt with it. Peter, let's start with you. My understanding is from talking with you before that you can't just walk up to a building in New York City now and say, "Hi, I'm here." Or there's some, you have to do a little homework. Could you talk about that for us?
Yeah, that's a great point. I don't think you can go up to any building in New York and say, "Hi, I'm here" anymore. So but the protocol is we've been gathering information. We've been essential and been out since March, April, but we've had people going on site. So what we've been doing is asking our clients and customers to supply what is the protocol to get into the building. Some of them require masks and gloves. Some of them require just masks. Some of them take your temperature. Some of them ask you to put a survey in. And so what we've been doing is accumulating everything from each client and documenting that. And before a tech goes on site, making sure that they have that protocol. They understand that what needs to happen before they go to that building. So it's really know before you go. And it's sort of a mantra at our company. Understand what the protocol is before you go to the space. And so that's what we've been doing, is documenting everything, document building policies, office policies, putting it in a database, and making sure everybody has access to that.
So Barry, as far as the law firms themselves and our offices themselves in dealing with our employees, what sort of guidelines do we have available for that?
So we've done a tremendous amount of research, done a lot of reading, watched a lot of seminars. Really, a lot of things that we've been guiding our clients have been CDC related stuff. So stuff that they've been offering to us, which we've been passing on to them, because there's so much information out there, and sometimes everybody's just like, what's correct? So the majority of what we've read seems consistent where, and I'm talking about masks, and that's really the big thing for people in the office, because everybody doesn't want to wear a mask. It's just not very comfortable. So the rule is basically within a private office, if you're in your own individual private office, you need to not wear, you do not need to wear a mask. If you leave your office to go to the bathroom, go to the water cooler, or talk to a coworker, you need to absolutely put your mask on. Second thing is, if you're in an open area, which is the majority of the spaces that we're working with today, have bullpen, whether it's benching or cubicles, whatever it is, if we haven't installed plexiglass, or the people are not 6 feet apart, then they need to be wearing masks as mandatory. So that's obviously a big factor when you obviously bring back your people, because people don't mind wearing masks when they're on the street, when they're on the train, but when they come to the office to wear a mask for 8 hours of a day, they're thinking twice about it, or wanting to think twice about it, because it's not comfortable. But it's important, it's vital, and that's where the plexiglass, or obviously what Rick and I were talking about before, the reconfigurations, allowing people to sort of separate or give them higher walls, allows them to really remove the mask and sort of be comfortable within their office space. One of the things which is similar to what Peter's doing, and we're going to work on some of the documentation, but we absolutely do send an email with a letter to our clients that we're going to visit as salespeople or actually installation company to when we're doing work in their space. So we're sending them a note letting them know that our employees are coming there, our employees will be wearing masks. Our expectation is you'll be doing the same, because we want to keep our people safe as we want to keep your people safe. So if our employees are working within your space or visiting your space with you, then all your people need to be wearing masks while we're working around you.
And so you have those, you've developed these policies, you need to make them aware. So we're protecting not only the clients, but obviously protecting our people too. And I would think with the law firm, as people begin to come back into the firm to have work done, some policies probably wouldn't be a bad idea to have in place to send to your clients before they come in, telling them what's required as they come in. It could be similar to what I saw at a restaurant the other day: no shoes, no shirt, no mask, no service. So Rick, I understand that you work with some of these devices that are used to check temperature readings and do things like that as people are coming in. Can you talk about some of the technology that's involved in that?
Absolutely. So temperature readings obviously have become a very hot topic for the majority of my clients. And a lot of people are familiar with the traditional, we call it the analog method of having an office admin or office manager check temperature using a no-touch thermometer when everyone comes in, and just make sure they write down those temperatures. With that comes a little bit of liability in the fact that you're putting that office manager in front of all of these employees and really putting them in close proximity. So there's been some rapid innovation in technology to help assist with this. There's temperature kiosks and temperature tablet devices that will now hang on a wall or install on the kiosk that will monitor not only temperature, but whether employees are wearing a mask. And you can then tie that into your access control system to say, okay, if your temperature reads above a threshold, which is typically like 101 or over 100, then you won't have access into the space via the key card entry system. So we're seeing quite a bit of this. Our companies that we're working with are typically, if you're picturing a 10-floor building that there's maybe 20 entrances, where they're typically shutting down one of those entrances and only making the front entrance available, so that they can kind of monitor temperatures as they come through, and you're not having to do it at two entry facilities. Another area where we help is with lobbies and larger institutional clients. There's actually a camera-based system that'll monitor 15 to 20 employees or or visitors as they're walking through a space and give you the same alerts. Now with that, you'll also have to have a security guard who's monitoring on the screen and then tracking down those entrants as they're coming through. So we're seeing quite a bit of that. We're also there's other technologies that we'll talk about a little bit later that clients are rolling out, but also just the question about construction and kind of access issues. So obviously we're a construction company, we're back to work, and we're coming to these sites and we're tracking everything in a cloud-based system where everything's going back to the office via the temperature scanner, but we're seeing quite a bit of issues for downtime associated with construction projects. So it's something you really have to be in front of. The reason for that is, one of the reasons is shifts. So a lot of the general contracting firms are stating that let's say the electricians start at 6, the carpenters start at 7, and the low voltage integrator starts at 8. So they're trying to shift out that work so you don't have as many construction workers on site at once. But with that is going to come a lot of union issues. Obviously, we're going through union negotiations to determine having quite a bit of that right now, as well as reduced elevator occupancy coming into these sites. So, where you used to have 10, 12 construction personnel on the elevator, now you're restricted to 2 to 4 construction personnel. So it's creating a ton of downtime. So we see it as something that's going to be there's going to be a lot of discussion about it moving forward for construction projects. And with that, I kind of see an area right now for projects that are in construction. There'll be a lot of change orders, but moving forward, I think you're going to see a lot of elevated construction costs to cover the time lost to accommodate these changes. And I think ultimately this is going to fall onto the client. So I just expect a lot of conversation on it moving forward.
So it's important, I guess, to consider those things as you're going into it. I also understand, and I actually was speaking with Chelsea about this a few days back, there are some, for smaller offices who might be standalone or something like that, there's some very low price temperature checkers, as I understand, that you can install on your entrances and exits from the buildings. And so that's something that would be worth looking into. So it's really technology that's not beyond any of us, as long as we have the right people who tell us what direction to go in and what we might choose to use for that. So let's move in. You talked about existing products or projects that are already in place and people working and building those out. So from what you're finding, are your clients who recently signed leases, are they designing their spaces differently? Are they changing things all around? Are they just being creative on the current seating arrangements and the current way things are laid out? And how are they dealing with that, dealing with employee scheduling and that type of thing to handle the reduced capacity? Barry, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, I can jump in there. Thanks, Ken. So there's sort of two ways to look at it. Sort of there's pre-COVID and there's present-day COVID. I would say pre-COVID, because a lot of the projects that all of us were working on, sort of January, February, they were in the design stages, have been kicked off probably starting like June, July. Majority of those clients have really stayed with their initial design and really have not altered it. Whether it be the open benching system, whether it be the private offices, whether it be the conference rooms, whatever it may be, they're really kind of sticking to the design. And I'm going to talk about something else, and then I'm going to come back to that in a second. The second thing is the clients that we're working with over the last month and a half have been absolutely thinking twice about how they're designing the spaces and really how much real estate they want to take. With all that sort of said, is that really people are making investments into a real estate acquisition. It's usually at least that's 3 to 10 years. So it's a long time. The idea is that this vaccine is going to happen within the next, God willing, within the next 6 to 12 months. And when that happens, people will gradually be coming back to the office a little bit more. But the actual design of the offices, they sort of have a vision of how they envision, how they plan for their spaces, how they plan for their employees. And I think they're sort of sticking with most of that. I will say that some of the present day ones that we're working with are thinking about adding, or they are not thinking about, they are adding some partitions. They're not adding plexiglass because it's not the today thing, but soon they might be. But I think the idea is that less people are coming back to work. They're separating people. They're not bringing everybody back at once. So I think there's enough space within these office spaces that they're building out that if they have 30 to 40 or 50% of their staff, there's still plenty of room for people to be socially distant from each other. One of the big things that we've been seeing, and I would say it's been around for many years, and I think it's going to even become more popular, is an idea called hoteling. And what that is really utilizing the same space that you have, but really doing a desk share. So what happens is, well, same space you have, but also really even almost doing a little bit less space, because the idea is that if Ken and I had alternative days, we're sharing the same desk, we clean our setups after we're done, but he does Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do Tuesday, Thursday. Following week, I do Monday, Wednesday, Friday, whatever it is, we rotate. So the idea is less furniture, less space, and obviously the same amount of employees. So that's a really big factor, and I think that people are really going to start looking into that, because people are realizing after working at home for the last 5 months that they're getting it done, and a lot of businesses are getting it done. Some businesses can't. We're on the street, so our boots are on the ground. So what we do for a living, with basically Peter a little bit less, but Rick for sure needs to be in the field. So it's important for us to be out there, but more people are definitely thinking twice about doing some of the hoteling. And really, real estate tends to be people's largest investment after payroll. So it's one of the things, if they could do less space for the same amount of people, and I can, give them the flexibility to work one day, work not another day at home, I think it's going to be a very fluid system. It's going to be beneficial for all companies going forward.
So Rick, you haven't figured out then how to change wiring and do construction remotely?
I don't think so.
Peter,
Yeah.
the hoteling and sharing of office space and the different ways that we're working with now. Can you talk a little bit about what some of the technical challenges are, and what are the things we have to think about with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of different challenges. One is psychological. I remember in the early 2000s, hoteling was brought up and nobody wanted to share a desk. This is my desk, and now nobody wanted to work remote either, but now everybody's working remotes. But what's interesting now is there are certain people who need to come into the office either because they have children at home or there's some other issue and they have to come home. So what's important is scheduling and the hoteling where people will come in, and it's important that whatever you have, you've standardized. You've standardized on the type of laptops you've had, the docking stations, the keyboards, the mouse, so that when somebody comes in, plugs in with their stuff, it's going to come up right away. It's not going to reconfigure or reinstall or anything. You want to have the same configuration. So it's really important that when you do come back to the office in your hoteling, that whatever technology you're using, you've standardized, whether it's Lenovo, Toshiba, HP, Dell, whatever it is. You just need to have a standard, and that goes without saying with a lot of different technologies, but you have to standardize. The other thing that we notice is because people are going to be shifted around, you may need to have somebody who sits next to each other to work in a conference room or team room or some other room where they're not going to be connected through the wire. So it's important to really look at your wireless, make sure your wireless has the capability so that when you do come in, you can sort of hit the ground running. And keep in mind, the data that you're passing through that wire is a lot more than just a document or a legal document or PDF, whatever. You're doing video, you're doing voice, and so there's a lot more collaboration happening. So you have to take that into account when you're looking at your wireless. So a lot of legacy wireless systems may not work as well because they just don't have the capacity for that.
I know we've had those experiences even with some of our folks who have been working from home, particularly using Zoom to do training sessions and things like that. And that the technology just wouldn't support it. And then they found out their teenagers were back in their room watching videos, and they had to make some changes to make that happen. So I could see that. So if that's going to be the case, if the wireless is going to be the issue, then I assume you also would have to look at the general bandwidth coming into the office. So it's all part of a big picture then as it goes there.
Absolutely. It's not just put a Band-Aid on it, it works. You really need to take a look, see how much bandwidth you're using, because now people are inside the office, they're outside the office, and depending on what technologies you're using, if you're using cloud-based technologies, now you're going to have people accessing either the cloud or internal resources, or it depends on your document management system, your billing system. So you really need to take a look at whether the bandwidth you have is sufficient for now and for the future.
And is there, as far as security goes, are there things that need to be considered with people who may be working from home or working from places other than in the office in terms of firewalls or rules or those types of things?
Yeah, so what you basically need to do is extend the firewall. I mean, that's what you're doing. You need to extend it wherever they travel. So they need to have the same policies, the same rules. You know, you don't want somebody going to some bad site, so you need to monitor what sites and block the sites that people can go to so they're doing legitimate work. You know, you got to realize you're doing attorney-client privilege information. It's all either on that laptop or in the cloud. So if you get compromised, you know, that's a really bad thing. So it's really, really important to have the proper security on the laptops that you can control what sites people can go to. And I mean, I've heard of some firms going as far as monitoring productivity on laptops where they actually see, you know, how often they're in a Word document or WordPerfect for those legacy lawyers, or the billing system to see how productive people are doing and produce reports off of that. So that's another item that I'm seeing where people really want to get a hold on how they're monitoring their people, whether their people are being productive or not, other than looking at a time entry.
So a takeaway, I guess, from this is, as you said to begin with, you need to use a corporate computer. You need to use a law firm computer to do law firm work, a computer that's up to the standards and controlled by the same rules as everything that's in the office.
That is correct.
That makes perfect sense. Other technologies that we think might become prevalent post-COVID and that are in place now that we haven't seen a lot of, but just kind of some of the cutting edge there. Rick, could you enlighten us a bit on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked a little bit about the temperature kiosks and cameras, which are really in most of my clients now, they're looking at that. But there's a few other technologies that I think are definitely going to grow. One is for access control and key card entry systems. There's really a kind of a no-touch approach that a lot of our clients are taking, which essentially is using a credential that is not a key fob and is not a key card. So you're not presenting at the card reader. You're actually using your iPhone or Android device to open the door. So what does that give you? It gives you the ability to open the door from anywhere. So you're able to just open your phone, open the app, open the door when you're at home and the FedEx delivery person is on site, and you want to give them access to drop off a package. We're seeing quite a bit of that. We're also seeing other devices at the door that are no longer touch. So where by code you have to have a magnetic lock door, you have to have a push to exit button, which shunts the lock manually. That's now a proximity device. So that's now just wave your hand in front of the door within 10 inches, and that releases the door. As well as a big thing for our clients has been fingerprint and facial recognition. So where a traditional fingerprint reader would be something you would touch at the door and would release the access control door. That's really become a thing of the past, because with the embedded technology in the iPhone and Android devices, you can implement that without having users physically touch the device. So you use the software on the phone to take a facial recognition scan or take a fingerprint reader and allow access into the spaces. So that's become something that we've seen a lot of our clients go that route, just because it makes sense. Everybody typically has their phone on them, and a lot of times they'll have a backup key fob as well. But the iPhone and Android credential is a big thing, and no touch access control. Another area that we see not so prevalent in law firms, but we see it prevalent more in retail, is people counting. So systems that instead of having I don't know if you've walked into a Home Depot lately where they've tracked how many people are going into the space and how many people are leaving and allowed access. That's where you see these long lines. People counting software will actually determine how many people have walked in and on a ticker tell you how many have left and provide access that way. So you have less employees involved there. And then the third thing I will mention is UV light disinfectant systems. So lights today, which are LED lights, inherently have 60 watts of power or lower. So you can power those over a data cable. So you don't need to run a high-powered circuit to lights anymore. So what does that give you? It gives you kind of an open ceiling architecture where it's Internet of Things. So you can tie other systems into it. And one of those systems is UV light disinfectant. So what that means is at 6 to 8 p.m., you could actually individually lock a door for an office, and then use UV light disinfectant to clean the space. So not really a case for a retrofit. It's more for systems PoE lighting systems that have already been installed. But for our clients that do have PoE lighting, it's something that they're all doing now is UV light disinfectant. So I think you'll see a lot more of that, and I think one of the main drivers will be this disinfectant system. That's why companies will go to the PoE lighting. So a lot to come on the tech side for sure.
That's very interesting. I know what I've talked to you about this before. It feels like we're in a sci-fi movie with the different things that we can do now that we never would have dreamed. And of course, showing my age, which with the picture that shows my age anyway, I go back to Dick Tracy with the watch and all the stuff that's going on now. And we said, we'll never be able to do that. Peter, any sort of mobile apps, anything like that from your technology standpoint, in addition to what we've talked about?
Yeah, so the biggest thing with the mobile apps is, you're checking in. You want to make sure that whoever's coming into your space, fills out that 4 or 5 question survey, and it actually will integrate with a lot of door systems also. So if you say you've been in contact with somebody who had COVID or whatever, it won't open the door. That's part of the integration. But it's putting it on the phone or a tablet or some mobile device, clicking, you don't have any fever, you haven't been in contact with anybody, you don't have any of these symptoms, and you haven't traveled to any of the banned states, in the last, 2 weeks or so. So those are the things, and then it gets recorded into a database, and we'll integrate with a lot of the access control systems. So it's nice to have a mobile app. You could just click, in less than 5 minutes, you can gain entrance to the space.
I would think it occurs to me that having those questions included, for example, in an email to a client just prior to them coming to visit, someplace in there to have that confirmed, other than having someone have to sit and interview them when they come in. It sounds like there are a lot of ways to make that happen, and it sounds like it makes an awful lot of sense. So my question for the three of you, as we've talked about all of these different pieces and all of these different parts that go into handling the space and getting everything retrofitted, get it back and get it ready to go in, there are a lot of moving parts in that. If we were building a house, we'd have a general contractor. When you're doing this type of work and having these 3 different areas there, I'm assuming that there needs to be a lot of coordination between your different aspects of what's going on. Can you talk a little bit about how you handle that? Who takes responsibility for being the quarterback when you first start out with this? And Peter, would you like to address that first?
Sure. So the important thing is you want to have accountability regardless. So you want to make sure you have good professionals. So whether it's me or leading it, or Rick or Barry, any one of us can lead it because we're familiar with each other's businesses. So we know what it would take. And you call on people who know more than you in an area where you're not as familiar with. So Rick mentioned PoE lighting. So PoE lighting plugs into a Cisco switch, is plugged in, and the power is on a network port on a Cisco switch. So we're familiar with Cisco. Rick's familiar with the lighting system. So he may use us to do sort of the back end. He would do the programming because we don't want to get involved in that. But in the end, if I'm leading it, I take responsibility. I'm accountable. But it's really important to have accountability and make sure that you bring in the right people, you bring in a trusted advisor, and you bring in people who know what they're doing. Because one of the things I've always aligned myself with people who are professionals, know what they do, and that's why my projects that I work on are successful. There are always bumps in the road, but in the end, if there's a bump in the road, you know that as a professional, you're going to make things right. It's all about making sure the project is successful in the long run.
So Barry, if I were to call you and say, we really need to upgrade our office, then I'm assuming at that point you would advise me to say, okay, well, let's put the team together that needs to be put together and assemble the players or make the recommendations. Do you end up project managing kind of in that regard? Do the office managers do it? Are you an advisor to the managers? How's that typically happen?
Yeah, I would say, majority of the projects that we're getting involved with tend to be these sort of reconfigurations or sort of outfitting some of this plexiglass. So what happens is you're getting business owners, office managers, whether they're in the office or not in the office, sort of spearheading like, all right, I think it's time, we got to do something. Hey, we're going back October 1st. And then of course it leads into lead times, which we can talk about in a few minutes, and being prepared for. But typically we'll go in as a consultative basis and really evaluate what their needs are and then make recommendations. People have vendors. So you never want to step on people's toes, because if they have a good wiring person, they got a good data person, they've got a good mover, there's no reason that we need to do everything, but we all need to be working hand in hand, because these projects tend to be tight time frames. And usually you're not getting, too many times you're not getting designers and architects involved that tend to be doing some of the project management. So we kind of step in. So of course, if they don't have people that they rely on, we love bringing people that we obviously use all the time, just because we speak the same language. We're all working out for the same benefits. And the truth is we cover each other. So sometimes we don't all see the same thing. So it's always having another pair of eyes that's, working on the same kind of projects or been working together. So to answer the question is, we do a lot of consultations, we do a lot of recommendations, and we really just, really try to pull the right people together for the right project.
Good, that makes sense. It sounds like it would be a must. I would hate to try to figure out all those moving pieces myself, not knowing what's going on with it. So Rick, when it comes to putting a plan together, we'd said, all right, today we need to get this done. We realize it's an issue. How long does it take? What are we looking at in terms of lead time, and what are the considerations that have to go in this to get that put together?
Good question. So I would say I agree with everything that Barry and Peter said. Because a lot of these projects don't warrant hiring a general contractor, it is important that you set up weekly meetings and you're setting expectations and have the appropriate reporting, just to kind of to move on that a little bit. But in terms of lead time, so we were in a 3-month no construction backlog. So there was a lot of construction that should have been taking place that wasn't because of COVID. Now, so what that's done to schedules is where we typically had a week to get labor on site, we're now 2 to 4 weeks out for labor, which I'm seeing as a trend across all industry. And we are also seeing supply chain lead time issues with things like cabinets and racks and hardware that you could typically get on site in 2 weeks is now 4, 6, 8 weeks, depending on the product that's specified. So it's not like it was pre-COVID, and I think that you'll continue to see that. So it is important to have a very detailed schedule up front, so all those expectations are met, and it's understood that there's going to be some time to get product on site. I think Peter, if you want to touch on some of the things that you're seeing, like wireless access points. I know there's issues in lead times there as well.
Yeah, so we're seeing some supply chain issues also with wireless access points, network, switches, firewalls, where usually we can get it within 3 or 4 days, and now we're talking 3 weeks, 4 weeks, sometimes as much as 6 weeks. So we have we're reconfiguring an office we want to do in September. It's now pushed to October because we can't get the equipment in fast enough. So it's a real, if you're going to be doing this, you need to plan this out. You can't assume that you're going to get this stuff tomorrow. It's not like you can click on Amazon and it's going to show up at your door tomorrow morning. This is, sophisticated equipment, and for whatever reason, it's taking longer to get it. And I'm not an economist, I don't understand supply chain. All I understand is when I look and see that something is back ordered and then shipment is expected in 3 or 4 weeks, that's all I know. So it's something you really need to plan out, and it's not something you could do in a week.
Barry, are you finding a similar thing for you?
Yeah, I was actually going to jump in. Is one of the big things that it's related to the supply chains. Obviously, plexiglass has become a new thing for all these manufacturers. People have been making plexiglass forever, but it's obviously there's not a million companies that are actually out there manufacturing the product. So that's an issue of actually getting the product. So a lot of the times there's a little bit of, for sure, lead time that goes with that. But I will say that I feel it's a lot of, because most of our manufacturers have been essential businesses that haven't stopped. But what happened from March till June, mid-June, which is say 3 months or thereabouts, that they were doing half production. And the truth is they still are doing half production. They're only allowed a certain amount of employees in their factories. So they're only able to produce. So what that does is that it slows everything up as far as actually manufacturing the product. So going with what Peter is saying is, why is a 3 or 4 day lead time 3 to 6 weeks? It's just, there's been such a loss of time just because the same amount of people are not producing. And obviously there's become a big need for certain things, but there's obviously a lot of things that are just taking longer just because people cannot produce. And some things are coming from overseas. So they had to slow down sort of March and April. So they literally shut down, different than what we did. We sort of slowed down, they shut down. So when you shut down factories overseas that a lot of our materials are coming from for 2 months, it's such a backlog. And then eventually they start going back, but they're going back half speed. And then now they're up to speed, but they're just catching up.
So I can tell my kids, if you think getting toilet paper is tough, you should try to get plexiglass.
Yeah, 100%.
Put it in perspective. So for the firms who are going to have people coming back to work, and obviously they have to get on it now, there is a lot to do to retrofit, to get things set up and moving forward. What sort of stopgap measures or what sort of advice would you give them to try and take care of things the best they can in the meantime while they're waiting for all this to happen with those lead times?
You want me to try? I can jump in there. I mean, it's
Sure.
really just, I think that a big part of it is people being proactive. I think that a lot of people, especially the small to medium-sized companies, larger corporations have big, teams and people are involved with it. But I would say the small client that's 10 to 75 people, tend to be run from a managing partner to a CFO to an office manager. They're not really planning or really giving enough time to make things happen because they don't really know when they're going back. They have this vision that they're going back. It went from June 15th to July 5th to Labor Day to October 1st to January 1st to June, and who knows when it takes it from there. With that said, is that a lot of times people are saying, all right, well, we're doing business, we're active here. We're not going back to some people are not going back to the office, but the smaller tenants want to get back to the office, and they're just not giving enough lead time. And going back to what Rick says is that you really do need to have some process with planning, because it's not just planning and organizing and getting your team, and then you got to obviously, facilitate it and get it ordered. And then if it's 6 or 8 weeks, like Peter said, you have to give a lot that time. That's even before you made a decision. So
Common sense would say, even though you may not be able to execute immediately, start building your plan now, because you're not going to start this without a plan. And it appears from talking with you that the plan needs to be much more comprehensive than what we may have thought about before in where we're headed with it.
Yeah. We had a client recently that we got an order for them for plexiglass. For their order was about 45 people, and the day before we were installing, she got notice that they're not coming back to January 1st. But of course, we're already got the material. She says, all right, set it up in case someone wants to come back early. But really, they're not, they're 6 months ahead of the game, but they didn't know. They thought they were coming back after Labor Day. And then, the CFO made a decision to extend it. So better to be prepared, because I think that whether we have a vaccine in 3, 6, or 9 months, and you want to get people back to the office, you really need to, be proactive and get the right things in place.
Well, thank you. Thank you. You've all three been great, and I appreciate a lot of good information here. I know that you referred to some things. Rick, you referred to a white paper on the things to consider, and Barry, you've made some references, and Peter, I know you have materials available. So if there's anyone in the webinar today who's interested in follow-up on those or some more information, just send us an email. You have the invitation that you can reply to or questions in the chat box, and everyone will be more than happy to respond with you and help you in whatever way you can. We have a few minutes left, and we have time to take questions. Chelsea, do we have any questions? Anyone ask anything?
Everyone can go ahead and enter those in now. Just off the top of my head, working with law firms as everybody enters their questions in, what is the typical lead time? You mentioned that these things are these tools and resources and equipment are not available, right off the bat. What is your recommended planning term for a return to work or reopening of an office? Is it 30 days? Is it 90 days? So what is the typical lead time that you request or recommend with clients?
I mean, I could jump in as far as the furniture, and then maybe obviously Rick and Peter, you could each obviously just capture that real quick. I mean, as far as reconfigurations, it tends to be, it's never what you have there is exactly what we need. So there's always materials that we need to buy. So some manufacturers are working on 3 weeks to 6 week lead times with, say a partition system. And then you have with the plexiglass right now, some manufacturers are 2 weeks, but a majority of them are like 4 weeks. And that's just getting the materials. So there's obviously a consultation that's got to go in. There's an evaluation. There's a process of potentially doing a drawing and gives people a visual of what this will look like. And obviously covering that with their partners. So there's a process of maybe 1 to 2 weeks of getting a decision made between the consultation and making a decision. And then you got to assume another, say 3 to 4 weeks of actually getting the product. The installation is usually no more than a couple of days.
So it sounds like from your standpoint.
Yeah, I was going to say 6 to 8 weeks is a good. Yeah.
I was going to say about 90 days. Just about the same time frame.
Right. Oh, that makes sense.
And we do have a few follow-up questions to that. What is the average cost per person investment that a company can expect to make?
That is a good question.
I mean, I could speak about the hard goods. I mean, if you're talking about plexiglass, it could be $350 to $500 a person. I mean, it could be, but it could be less because depending on, again, it depends on the configuration. And how much privacy they want, how separated are they, how many people are coming back to the office. So there's really a lot of variables, but you really have to, just for the hard goods of, plexiglass, I'd say $300 to $500 per person is real, because the plexiglass is, I mean, I think the margins are pretty high on that stuff, not on our end, unfortunately, but for the manufacturer, they're taking advantage just because it's supply and demand. So that's all right.
Yeah, I would say on a furniture reconfiguration is $150 a person on our end. So you'd add that on the temperature scanning, the temperature kiosks. We like to say, really $10 a person. You're looking at a $3,000 kiosk installed. So 30 employees, about $10 a person. And if they expand to another floor, you would add another unit. So that's around, the temperature scanning is pretty economical when you take into account the fact that you're paying an employee to do it if you don't have the kiosk. So.
And from my perspective, it's too difficult to say what it's going to be per person. It really depends what you have in place now. I mean, it could be as little as $50 to $80 a person, or it could be $400 or $500, or up into the thousands, depending on what equipment they have, the age of the equipment, how and how standardized you are in the office. So it really depends on what, if you're standardizing, you have things locked down, it's going to be on the lower end. But if you don't have things locked down, then it's that's where you're going to start to spend a lot of money just to lock things down and to standardize.
Well, now, Peter, I know surely you never go into a law firm where everything's not standardized and all the technology is not up to date.
Never happened.
That's what I thought. Barry, did you have something to say?
I just had a point, and I could speak for Peter and I could speak for Rick as well, is that we do a lot of consultation for clients, a ton of it. So we go in, we evaluate, sometimes we give it everything in the soup, in the kitchen, in the sink, and then you take what you want. We make recommendations, we make suggestions, and the numbers might be higher than you want, but we always go in and say, do what you want, see what you feel comfortable with. But the idea is that you want to bring your employees back. They need to be comfortable to work in that environment. You need to know that you've done everything you can to make them feel comfortable. So we're going to tell you everything that we've done and seen over the last 6 months, and then you do what you want with it. Whether you do business with us or not, hopefully you just appreciate our efforts and refer us to a friend, kind of thing.
Yeah, Barry's right on point. It's about being the trusted advisor. I remember years ago, I lost a client because I didn't recommend what I felt was right for them. And in the end, I said, I really wanted to talk about this, but I didn't think you would spend the money. And he says, well, you shouldn't have done that, and thank you very much. And that was, that was about 30 years ago. And I've lost a lot of hair since then, and also I gained a lot of knowledge. So I always recommend what I feel is best and let the client say no. If you want to say no, I'll give an option A, option B, option C. This is what you could do, option A. And if you want to do it right, it's option C, and let them make the decision. And I'll always give various options.
We do the same thing in our business, and I learned the same lesson about the same time. So I know exactly what you're talking about. We have a couple of more minutes. Chelsea, do you have some other questions there?
Yes, absolutely. So there are varying levels or varying approaches that law firms are using to go back to the office. And some of the pain points that are driving these decisions are unreliable home internet, the increased risk of cyber attacks using personal devices. So note that as these figures may vary as to the number of people that are coming into the office, are you seeing firms return their entire staff to work, or are you seeing firms approach with different models? Like there has been the 2-3, where half of the staff comes in 2 days a week and the other half comes in 3 days a week. There's also the voluntary model where staff who have home internet issues or don't have a quiet working space have volunteered to come in. What has your experience been in the format or approach of law firms returning back to work?
So what I've been seeing in some of the small to medium-sized firms, nobody's really going into the office unless it's just not workable at home. So if they have bad internet, it's just, or there's some family issue that's stopping them from doing work. But most of the people are staying home. They're either staying in their regular house or their country house, or they are not coming into the office. And I don't know if they're going to come back anytime soon. The people who need to work and can't work it from home are going into the office. And what you're losing in the office, it's like they'll work in the office, but nobody's having meetings at the office. They're all on Zoom or Teams or whatever technology you use. So there's no water cooler discussion. There's no collaboration in person. Everything is remote anyway. And people are getting used to remote meetings. They're getting used to Zoom. They're getting used to Teams, GoToMeeting, whatever technology they're using. So a lot of the law firms that I'm talking to are not going back. They're not going back in September, and they're looking at probably sometime in 2021. So that's what I'm seeing in the people I've been talking to.
Peter, I wish you had advised me to buy Zoom stock back in March.
For all of us.
Yes.
And follow-up question to that. Any specific laptops you recommend for law firms who are working to get new software and move to the cloud and get their staff working remotely productively, especially if they've experienced, the surprise, I'm working from home on an XP laptop, a Windows XP laptop from 10 years ago. So any technology recommendations there?
So Dell Latitudes, you want to buy a business machine. You don't want to buy a home machine. You don't want to buy something that's sharing memory with the video card. You want an SSD drive. You want it to just boot up in seconds. You don't want to have to wait. The old spinning hard drives, you would wait, 45 seconds up until 2-3 minutes for it to boot up. So SSD drive, 16 gig of RAM is preferred, but you can get away with doing 8 depending on the type of work you're on. Something where you can plug an external monitor into it, external keyboard, a docking station, because the worst thing is to look at a screen this big, especially, that's why I wear glasses, and still these glasses aren't strong enough for me to look at a laptop all day. I need to hook an external monitor up to it. but any business type of laptop. You don't want to go with a laptop that is from one of the computer stores. You want shop online, look at Latitudes. You can, if you want precision workstations, if you want to go a little higher end for Dell. Lenovo has great X laptops, or the 400 series, the 500 series of Lenovo. Those are great laptops. Or the X1 Carbon is a really good laptop. I really like that laptop a lot. So those are the laptops, but stay away from the consumer grade laptops. You will end up throwing them out in about 6 or 9 months.
We've at Circle, we have for the last year or so, we've started to use Lenovo whenever we went to get travel laptops, and we've been really well pleased with those. They're great.
No, they make a nice laptop.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you both. And another question from the audience, when speaking with your clients and customers, have they expressed whether or not they feel their staff have been more or less productive working remotely versus working from the office? I think that's a $100 million question right there.
So, I mean, I've been talking a lot. So, Barry or Rick, do you have something you want to add?
Rick, why don't you jump in there for a second?
I think that a lot of my clients are saying that they're more productive due to travel time. A lot of our clients are commuting out from outside the city, from Westchester, from Long Island, from New Jersey, coming to the city every day. I think that there's less burnout because of that. But I also have a lot of clients that are ready to get back to the office at least 3 days a week. That may have been 5 days a week. And I think that's going to, like everyone has said, I think that's going to be the new norm, is being more creative about work from home. And I think that work from home will generally be more accepted. And I think you'll also see a reduction in space for a lot of large clients, and just being more creative with the space. I think we've all kind of touched on it, but I would say that's definitely what I'm seeing.
Chelsea, we've seen a similar thing with our clients. I think one of the determining factors is, are there children at home? And are you having to try to homeschool and work at the same time and deal with what goes on there? That's been a real hardship. Those folks obviously are having a very difficult time being as productive at home. On the other hand, my son works for Cannell Gates. He's worked from home and he's been much more productive. In fact, he's also complained because they had him work more hours than they did before COVID happened. So it kind of goes all over the board. But I agree with everyone else. I think we're going to see a shift in commercial office space, and I think there are going to be a lot of commercial office space buildings that are going to make nice condos. And I think they're also going to be, everyone who buys a condo now is going to need an office with it. So maybe that real estate's going to do great.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Great points, Ken. And we are at the top of the hour, and appreciate everyone for hanging out and chatting with us today. If you did not have your question answered, we will be happy to follow up with you after today's session. In the meantime, thank you so much to all of our panelists today, Ken, Rick, Peter, Barry. It's been incredible to hear your firsthand experiences as you're helping law firms reopen. Any final thoughts before we close out today's session?
No, I think we've all made it this far. We're all going to make it to the other side of this, and we're just going to do whatever it takes to have it happen, and we'll be happy and healthy on the other side, so hang in there.
Well said.
Well said, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Well,
Thank you, guys.
thank you all.
Bye-bye. Thanks,
Stay
Chelsea.
safe,
Thanks,
and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.